for me, if you take foundations in terms of being diet on one hand, lifestyle on the other, the diet that I believe has probably the most evidence behind it. And remember, it's really important that we don't grasp at straws, but we grasp for evidence, things that is showing us, gives us the best chance and opportunity to do well and be well. I think that the cornerstone of a diet with multiple sclerosis involves low saturated fat, particularly low saturated fat from animals. Most saturated fat in your diet will be from animals. So the rind on your chops and red meat, a big one for lots of us in the Western world is our interaction with dairy and butter, milk and cheese. I was a huge fan of that. And so saturated fat has been shown in lots of studies for over many, many years to have a negative impact in MS. So low saturated fat is the first thing. And the next thing is, as I've alluded to, dairy. So avoiding dairy. I think the jury is slightly still out on it, but I think there's certainly enough evidence to say that, well, A, it's got a lot of saturated fat in it anyway, so it's best to avoid it for that reason. But that there are specifically proteins in dairy, one of which being something called beta-roflin, which looks like myelin, which is the molecule in MS that's being attacked. So if your immune system is already fired up to attack myelin, you don't want to be feeding something that looks like myelin all the time to get its hackles up. And the analogy I often use is, it's like pouring petrol on a lit bonfire. So to me, I always think of that, and I haven't touched dairy since my diagnosis. So those are two big things. But so those are things you don't eat. But what do you eat then becomes a big question, because we obviously need to do that quite regularly. So for me, it's whole food, it's plant-based, and I also eat a lot of seafood. So it's avoiding processed foods and oils as much as I can. It's reliance on beans and lentils and those sorts of things, pulses, legumes, and quite a lot of seafood. And I think really the evidence is showing increasingly that not just for MS, that's really a very beneficial way to eat, but probably for general human health, there's an increasing body of evidence that a plant-based way of eating, certainly a moving away from a reliance on meat and dairy, there's ever increasing evidence of the benefits in that, and things like heart disease, diabetes, lots of inflammatory conditions, some cancers. So it just made sense to me. I'm trying to protect myself from MS. B, I'm trying to stay well as long as I possibly can and to be as well as I possibly can be. So I'm going to do things that stops me getting all the other Western diseases that unfortunately kill so many of us. So that's really the diet in a nutshell. So it's whole food, plant-based plus seafood.